Good afternoon, everyone. This is Stephanie with the Animal Protection Society, and I'm here with Claudine Wilkins, and we welcome you all to the Dangerous Dogs, when size doesn't matter and anything with a teeth or a beak can bite. Claudine, I'm going to hand it on over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. I'm Claudine Wilkins. I'm the founder of the Animal Protection Society and also Animal Law Source, which is a program that we do for training for all professionals involved in animal cases. I'm excited today because we have a special guest, and we're going to be talking about investigating and prosecuting and other tips on dangerous dog cases. Today, we are happy to have my good friend, Jim Crosby. Jim Crosby is a retired lieutenant from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and he has extensive canine behavioral training and expertise and has been extremely instrumental in dog bite cases. He's internationally recognized as an authority and court-accepted experts on canine attacks and aggression. Jim's specialty in investigating dog bite-related fatalities, especially evidentiary and behavioral factors involved in death cases. Jim's investigations of over 30 fatalities and post-attack evaluations of over 50 subject dogs has been essential in the numerous and successful prosecutions he's been part of. He assists prosecutors and agencies facing these cases and was recently on a scene in Central Georgia, actually, and we're going to be talking about that case. Jim has also assisted in dog fight investigations and was an expert in the Polk County, Georgia case where Devicio Rowland was sentenced to 50 years for dog fighting, one of the longest sentenced criminals in U.S. history. He also serves as an expert consultant regarding the use of deadly force by police officers against companion animals. In fact, we're going to mention how you can find virtual training for those police officers. It's a wonderful program for dog encounters by police. And Jim and his team have recently won a landmark case in Missouri where an owner was awarded $750,000 for the unlawful killing of his dog by the St. Louis County Police. He's earned his master's degree in veterinary forensics from the College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Florida, and he's currently completing his PhD studies there. Jim, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Claudine. It's good to see you as always.
You too. So folks, we're going to be talking about, we've got a PowerPoint, but we're not going to stick to it today. We're going to go through some of it, but we're also going to talk about what's lately been happening because of COVID-19. So let me share my screen with you all. Just a minute. Let's see here. Okay. From the beginning. There we go. Hopefully you can see the beginning of the PowerPoint here. The first thing I want to mention to you all is Jim will also be joining us in September. This year, our 22nd annual Animal Protection Expo. We're so excited to have various keynote speakers. Jim will be there. We have Dr. Jay Tischendorf, who will be talking about COVID-related pet issues and zoonotic diseases. We also have Dr. Jeff Young from Colorado, the famed Animal Planet doctor and Rocky Mountain vet. He'll be talking about spay and neuter issues and pet overpopulation. We're going to have a great audience of people this year alongside Vet South with their conference, and so get ready to see the agenda. It's going to be posted very soon, but you want to sign up. If you do, just go to animalprotectionexpo.org. And again, this year it's September 25th and 26th. Hopefully COVID-19 won't bother us by then, but we'll see. So in this particular hour that we're going to spend with you, we want you to know that a lot of items that we're going to be sharing with you today are these items right here. And these will be sent to you via email. We'll send you a link by email. And these are toolkits that you can use for your own services when you're out there investigating dog bites. And in particular, this one is about the Responsible Dog Owner Act that we have in Georgia, the law that pertains to our dangerous dog. Here is Jim's investigative worksheet. This is just one page of it. It's very detailed. We also have a COVID-19, why dog bites have increased toolkit. And then lastly, a prosecutor's checklist for those prosecutors out there just trying to remember everything they have to know about a dog bite case. So just a few things on statistics. Every 40 seconds, someone in the United States is being bitten by a dog. We have roughly almost nearing 80 million dogs owned in the United States. It is a very frequent visit to the emergency room. They say more than 350 dog bites are seen in emergency rooms every year. And I want to show you quickly, let's see if I can do this here for a second. I want to show you a quick video on how someone is bitten. Now I'm going to turn the sound down because I want you to see. Let me make sure I'm sharing this. Hold on for me, guys. Share screen. Here we go. Nope. No. There we go. That's it. Okay. So I'm going to enlarge this, and I want to just preface this. I show this in all my teachings because this shows you someone that is clueless to the warning signs of someone about to get bit. Notice the dog licking. Notice the dog moving his head backwards and his eye. He's doing what we call whale eye. Now this dog was rescued from an icy lake just the day before and brought on to a live newscast. And the person interviewing just doesn't really cue in on all the warning signs. So watch carefully. Here we go. Yikes, that was pretty rough. So let me go back to this here quickly. And okay, so obviously bad. Don't stick your face in a dog that's, already stressed out. So she, by the way, recognized that she was pretty much at fault there and got back on to her viewers to say, hey, it was my fault. I should have known better. What I want to say to you is Jim and I have been studying this issue for over 30 years, and I've seen many dog bites. I've seen autopsy pictures. I've seen videos. I've met kids that have been bit and are scarred for life. A dog bite can happen in a second. It can happen at home. In fact, most of the time it does happen with the family dog. Most of the attacks we see are from intact dogs that are not neutered, of course, and oftentimes it's during the summer months. It usually occurs on the homeowner's property, and oftentimes it happens while the dog is being fed or separated from another animal. And the dog bite cases are going up. Most of the victims involved in dog bite cases are children, the elderly, and of course, people that come onto your property, meter readers, USP, post carriers, and delivery people. In fact, with COVID-19, and I want to show this to you, this is one of the toolkits you can get today. We've got a lot more people fostering animals that have never fostered before. We've got a lot more people adopting animals that had never adopted before. We also have people that were fearful of catching COVID from their dogs, and because the shelters were not taking owner surrenders, they would literally dump them on the streets. So more stray dogs mean more dog bites. So all of these reasons are what we're seeing in an uptick in dog bites. Another thing too is a lot of people were more at home a lot. So when you have more people at home and the whole dynamics change in the home, we've seen more dog bites because of that, and also because more people are outside walking their dogs and interchanging with other people walking their dogs. And I hate to say it too, but some people that are not doing well and losing their incomes, they're having trouble accessing dog food. They can't buy it, they can't get to the food bank, and so they're limiting their dog's intake of food. So those are some of the factors. Jim, do you see any other factors that you've seen down there in Florida?
I think I think the biggest effect on dog bites from COVID-19 has been the enforced closeness and more involvement of the dogs with the families. That's not necessarily leading to dog bites, although I am a bit concerned about
Nope, I think we lost him. Stephanie?
jumping and downs.
I think we lost him.
Think back up and people are at work every day, where we're going to have dogs that are suddenly not surrounded by the social environment they were brought into. And we may have problems then with behavior issues that show up from the sudden separation from the people and the sudden changes, very profound changes in the environments they've gotten used to here.
Right. I think you'll agree with me that most of the victims are children, and most of those attacks are usually to their face.
Yeah, well, that's because kids tend to be dog-sized, and when a dog reacts or panics, it tends to bite the closest target. And if your face is at face level, that's where you get hit. It's very rarely a case of the dogs targeting the face. That's just the closest thing, and that's very dangerous because facial injuries leave serious permanent scarring, and there are also the blood vessels and nerves in the face and throat area that expose those children to a very high level of hazard.
Yes. A lot of our attendees today are from Georgia, and I wanted to point out some cases, notable cases in Georgia, and I know you've worked on several of these. If you look at this slide here on the fifth one down, you'll see Thomasville, Georgia. And this is the little girl that was killed, Cheyenne Peppers. Jim's going to talk about that in a few minutes, but I want to tell you this was the impetus for us to change the law. And I have researched the other times that the law has changed. For example, in 1989, a young boy was killed, and that was another change in the law. Again, a little girl named Mercedes was injured back in 2006, and that again changed the law. And so usually some tragic event has to happen before the law will change. And oftentimes it's not well thought out. It's not easy to pass a law, but we tried very hard to get all the things we wanted in it this year, or back in 2012. I worked on the law with, we're going to go over that. I'm going to show you the actual person who helped get the law passed. But here's just one snapshot of a year in review. And we had 31 fatalities in that year. And you can see here, all the ones that are in highlighted in green, these were children, either 17 months old, 6 years old, 2-day-old, 1-year-old. Most of our victims are children, okay? And most of them were killed by the family dog. And this is something I like to bring up too. As lawyers, we think in terms of assumption of risk and things like that. We are told that there's laws that protect children from entering a nuisance or in a risky place. One of those is a swimming pool, which we are required to put a fence around, but we're not required to put a fence around a dog. And I ask you, what would you prefer if you had a child going to be harmed? Would you want them by either one of these? Well, the answer is no to either one, but they're very bad, obviously. So chained dogs really are a problem in Georgia. The other thing I did is I recently did a national conference on just 10 tips. And one of the tips that I like to bring up is the need for uniformity of the law. The application of law needs to be uniform across the state. In these particular cases, the Aaron Ingram case, which was in DeKalb, and Javon Roberts, which was near Savannah, these were very similar cases, in fact, and both had severe injury. This little girl on her left, she lost her arm. And the little boy on the right, he's been scarred for life, broke his jaw, lost some of his teeth. But unfortunately, the law was not applied exactly the same way. In the case with Aaron Ingram, she's just an 8-year-old little girl playing basketball, and two very muscular dogs were kept in this crate in a hot, sunny day. And they finally got tired of being hot, and they moved the wires that would secure this thing. They started separating them, and they finally got free. And they ran down the road and attacked her. And actually, somebody that tried to save her took this picture, which really helped with the prosecution. But what bothers me here is that she was under attack for almost 5 long minutes before anybody arrived. And she did survive, thank goodness. That case warranted the dog owner to go to jail, and one of the highest verdicts that I know in the world, which was $72 million. She did not receive 1 penny of that because typically these folks don't have insurance. And but in this case, Javon here, he was playing on a playground, and 2 dogs jumped out of a car, ran to the playground, and he was one of the last children to run up the ladder, and he didn't make it, unfortunately. And they attacked him twice. His whole face was ripped off pretty much and re-put back, but the dog owner did not receive hardly any penalty. It was in magistrate court, there was a fine, there was absolutely no civil case whatsoever, and he's still enduring reconstructive surgeries. So one of the things we want to see is uniformity in the law. He came to one of our conferences, and we gave him a nice little gift, a bike. So all parties must work together. Law enforcement, medical professionals, animal control, animal shelter, or whoever harbors the dog after the dog has been impounded, including the veterinarian, and the prosecutors need to work together. And we need to pay attention to reckless dog owners, people that repeat the offense or has a obvious blatant disregard for the law. It's the person behind the leash, not the person, or not the dog at the end of the leash. And that's one of the reasons we named our dangerous state dog law a different name. We call it the Responsible Dog Owner Act. And it is a very long law, so we don't have time to go through it today, but I have the toolkit that is at your convenience. We are going to touch on it today. So one of the other things I like to say too is that predatory dog attacks on pets should be also taken seriously. In fact, we changed the law to make it crystal clear that if a dog leaves its property and kills another person's pet, that is a violation of the dangerous dog law here in Georgia. And there's a case called the turnip seed case. The same dogs had killed pets in the past in the neighborhood, and then the prosecutor decided to use reckless conduct. Sadly, nothing really serious was done about it, and then later the dogs ended up killing a little boy, and then he was charged with felony involuntary manslaughter because of the previous incidences. So I'm going to let Jim touch on this because this involves police encounters with dogs. Dispatch to a case is extremely important. Obviously, if somebody is sent to the wrong place, a police officer, they jump into the backyard and they are getting almost attacked by a dog that wasn't subject to a case, you know, how do they defend themselves? So dispatch should be trained just as much as police officers and animal control officers in all of these cases. Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit about law enforcement training for police encounters with dogs?
Yeah, we have developed myself, excuse me, in cooperation with the National Sheriff's Association and with sponsorship from the Department of Justice, the COPS office, a course called Law Enforcement Dog Encounters Training. We are in the final stages of approval through DOJ. And hopefully this will be the national standard for training of officers. And what we focus on is that, excuse me, that officers have tools other than their firearms that they can use to keep themselves safe, to keep the public safe, and to keep animals safe. We have less and non-lethal tools and methods of intervention that I can tell you as a retired law enforcement officer, we've been training on since the late 1970s. And there are even more options now. Officers to give them some information on how dogs react, what to expect, and how to prepare to keep everything at a safe level. There have been a number of shootings around the country. The courts, local, state, and federal, especially on the federal level, have been viewing these as possible Fourth Amendment violations, in that the dog, dead or injured, has been seized by law enforcement without due process available to the owners. And as such, we have gotten a number of very substantial awards. The St. Louis County Award was $750,000 for the shooting of one dog. And we've also gotten some very strong rulings across the country at the federal and the circuit court levels, that, and in the appellate courts, that dogs are now considered more than just property. It's not like accidentally shooting a hole in the side of your car, or as one agency used to put it, shooting an empty suitcase. The courts are now recognizing the value to the family and the value as beings of dogs, and are looking very, very closely at any seizure of these dogs, even though they're still property, as having more than just the replacement value of going down to the local animal shelter and adopting a rescue dog. So there's a lot of changes out there. As this happens, we are hoping that the LEDET training will be provided through assistance from a couple of places, including DOJ, for all officers for free, and in a form that they can access from their phones, from their tablets, from their car computers, and get this information out. They'll be able to get credit for having gone through the entire course. And hopefully we can give them, again, ways to keep themselves safe, ways to keep the animals safe, and ways to keep the public safe, because there have been police officers and civilians killed by gunfire that was intended for dogs.
Thank you, Jim. And on that note, I think we are going to actually provide this virtual training this expo in September. And speaking of the value of a pet, in Georgia, one can sue for loss of property for intentional emotional distress. A lot has to be proved for that, but I will say the Georgia Supreme Court has recently ruled just a year and a half ago on the value of a pet, and we're actually going to be doing a webinar on just that. They did expand what type of evidence can be brought in, but in general, the fair market value of the animal is still what we unfortunately do in Georgia, but other states are changing. So that is definitely a fluid area of law. So what I want to do is turn it over to you, Jim. I want you to give us what we're going to do just in the rest of the conference today is we are going to take questions at the end. Jim is going to give us his top 10 most important investigative tips, and I'm going to give you some prosecutorial tips. If you want to talk about some cases in Georgia too, that would be very helpful. I don't know if you can see your screen, Jim, but obviously you know this case. It was the case of little Logan Bratz. But feel free to give us your top 10, and then let's hear about some cases that you've worked on in Georgia.
Yes, the Logan Bratz case and several others in Georgia I've been directly involved in and have actually been boots on the ground. The most recent one was a human fatality in central Georgia, where a couple of dogs from a neighboring property came onto the victim's property, and because of the attack, he lost his life. The locals there did a good job, just as the locals in Thomasville did an excellent job years ago. But I think the first tip and the first rule we need is to understand that a dog fatality has a little bit different evidence than person A stabbing person B on the street corner. So we need to get all of the evidence. This is a homicide case. This is not just a dog case. Someone has lost their life. So we need to get all of the evidence. That includes the physical evidence, the testimonial evidence, and the behavioral evidence from the dogs, because evaluating the behavior of the dogs can give us extremely useful information on identifying the triggers and contributing factors that led to this ultimate negative encounter between dogs and humans. So we need to be skilled. We need to make sure, for instance, that we have medical examiners that are aware of the different kinds of evidence, such as swabbing inside deep puncture wounds for DNA from the dog. We need to make sure we understand that the dogs themselves are evidence, and that there are samples we need to collect from the outside and the inside of the dogs so that we can properly document and identify what dogs are responsible. Underlying that all is the basic tip. These cases, whether they're life-threatening or simply more than the finger, they need to be taken seriously. Are homicides. Now, as we have happening in the police force cases, is police are not getting all of the information they need before they go to the call, or they're getting bad information. So our 911 dispatchers and receiving officers need to be aware that the officers need to know if there are dogs present or likely to be present on a call, even if the call doesn't involve dogs. It's a simple question. Are there dogs present? If the person responds, yes, we have dogs here, then the best policy is to have your 911 personnel say, sir or ma'am, could you please put your dogs away or contain them before the officer gets there? This gives the officer a head start and a chance to have no contact with the dog. And the best contact is no contact. If you avoid a fight, you automatically win. So we need to get all of the information to the officers, no matter what the call is. If it's a silent alarm, we need to know if there are dogs present, and especially if there are guard dogs present, so that the officers can proceed safely. One way to work on improving our responses is for our agencies to work together. Animal control today, and especially in Georgia, where I have worked with them, and in other states, is far more than just the dog catcher or the people with the feral cats. Instead, they're professionals, and they have information due to their training that is different and directly applicable to animal cases. And by the police, who generally have very little training in dealing with animals, working with local animal control, or even the next county over, because I know that Georgia control officers in every county, but working together to expand both sets of skills will help keep people and animals safer, and will help do better prosecutions. For an example, in Polk County, up outside Cedartown, as Claudine mentioned, Devicio Rowland was arrested for dogfighting. In that case, the local police, the county police, the animal control and animal rescue organizations, and myself all came together. We went in on 2 separate properties and seized 107 dogs that Mr. Rowland was abusing to train to fight each other. Many of these dogs had bona fide records that established they were actively used for fighting. That was their purpose. By working with Jack Browning, the state attorney for that district, who took the case seriously from the get-go and actually called me to come up and assist. From Jack to the police to everybody working together, we put together a massive and successful case. So Devisio Rowland was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Now that's the largest and longest sentence in US history. Remember, Michael Vick got 23 months for money laundering. Devisio Rowland got 50 years for dogfighting. That was because we partnered and we all came in with different levels of skills. We reached out to surrounding counties and agencies to bring in the people we needed, and we made a massive invasion, basically, of this case. Now, that leads us to another thing, and that's the use of experts. I strongly recommend, and not just because I do it, bringing in experts for things you've never done before or things you're not certain with. I was able to go up to Polk County. I've been involved in a number of dog fatalities across the US, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, and in Australia, and have been able to, by my presence, help inform and educate the agencies there so they've been able to do a better job later. Now, you need to be careful where you reach out for experts. A lot of places will reach out to simply the local canine officer. I was with the police department here for 22 and a half years. I worked with canine. I love the canine guys, but we need to realize that canine officers are used to dealing with highly selected, highly trained dogs under very specific circumstances. Not all of them can make the transition from training a very effective dog with a job to generalizing to how do we deal with a dog fighting case, or how do we deal with a homicide by dog. Asking a canine officer to deal with basic behavior may be kind of like asking an F-35 high-tech jet mechanic to fix your Volkswagen. It doesn't necessarily transfer. They're very skilled, they're very talented, they know a lot, but if you're going to call in an expert, call in the right kind of expert. I think those are the biggest issues that I run across. Taking it seriously, understanding these are different cases. These are cases that have different things going on. And that ultimately, when we're looking at a dog case, we're looking at actions by a semi-sentient, at least, decision-making living organism. And there's more to it than just, oh, there's a dog here, the dog did it. We put down the dog and clean up the scene.
Right.
Claudine knows a couple of them. I've been involved in a couple of sets or scenes where there has been a death, there have been dog bites, and we've been able to determine through the evidence that they were actually human-caused homicides. They were murders that then involved dogs afterwards in an attempt to cover up. Had in those cases the assumption been made that it's a dog, there's a body, the dog must have done it, then there are people who would be completely walking away from justice. So that, I think, is the biggest lesson to remember. It ain't always what it looks like, and it needs to be taken seriously.
Right, right. Let me ask you a couple of questions, Jim. Right now on the screen, I don't know if you can see it, but I have your investigative dog bite worksheet. Now we've got about 20 minutes left. So what I want to do is hit on some important points. And I also want you to tell me 3 things that went wrong in the last cases you worked in. For example, I remember in the Atlanta case, certain pieces of clothing weren't brought in. So give me 3 catastrophes in your cases, and then share with me the most important parts of your investigative worksheet.
Sure. 3 of the biggest things that have gone wrong. Well, the first is that they wasn't taken seriously to begin with. Because remember, as prosecutors, as law enforcement, as animal control, if you don't get the evidence the first time round, you don't get it at all. You've got 1 shot and 1 shot to get it right. So for instance, retaining the clothing was a problem because the clothing wound up being the most likely site of recovering DNA and being able to identify it to the dog itself. A second problem we've had is that agencies get in too huge a hurry to destroy the potential dogs needlessly. Understand, if I come in, I'm not there to save the dog. That's not a question. In most states, it's mandatory that a dog involved in a human fatality be destroyed. It's just the way it is. Part of it is the issue with the dog, and part of it is the issue that the kind of people who would want to adopt a dog that's killed someone are not the kind of people we want to have dogs as pets.
Right. Well, good. Okay. And you're
Um,
can you hear me okay, Jim?
So the issue is that you don't get in a hurry to dispose of the dogs because they're part of that evidence. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're breaking up a little.
Okay. Continue. We can hear you now.
Okay. I'm sorry. So like I said, we want to make sure that we don't get in a hurry to just destroy the dogs. There's things we can get from the dogs. They don't need to be put down out of some kind of revenge right then. Let's try and hold them. Animal control has the skills. They deal with dogs with unknown histories and bite histories all the time. So trust your animal control people.
Right.
Probably the third biggest issue is, again, making assumptions. Just because you have someone that's injured and you have a dog there, we need to make sure we have the right dog. In one of the Atlanta cases, 2 dogs were picked up for killing Logan Bratz. They were seized. Everybody patted themselves on the back and thought they had done a good job. Fortunately, they didn't get in a hurry, and I came up and, at the prosecutor's request, helped out, and we were able to look at the 2 dogs, to measure their jaws, to look at the evidence, and exclude those 2 dogs. It wasn't either one of those dogs that attacked Logan Bratz. And in fact, because they had the wrong dog, a week later, an elderly gentleman in the same neighborhood was seriously attacked by the right dog and wound up suffering major injuries because we'd kind of relaxed too soon. We'd assumed that the 2 dogs that were seen first must have been the dogs that did it. And one of those 2 dogs had a jaw structure that was so crazily so crazily misshapen that the dog couldn't have even bitten regular food. That dog was eating just soft food that was almost spoon-fed. So I'd say the third problem is making assumptions too quickly and jumping off and acting too quickly.
Great. One of the things I want to mention too is it's hard for prosecutors to explain to a jury or judge, exactly what is a severe dog bite and what isn't. And I know that you use the Dunbar scale of dog bites, but you also go into your investigative worksheet. You get really detailed. You ask questions like, do the children pet the dog, hug the dog, kiss the dog? Do they bend down over the dog? What happens when you enter and leave a room? You know, when you reach for the leash, what's the dog's reaction? I mean, you really get detailed in your investigative worksheet. These are things that really do matter when if the case goes to trial, which most of these don't go to trial. There's a plea and then it's over. But if it does go to trial, the prosecutor needs to be able to articulate to a judge or jury these things. So tell us about the Dunbar scale, and tell us a little bit about your investigative worksheet. Like you talked about, is the dog in heat, or was, you know, did it have puppies, things like that. Can you hear me, Jim?
The Dunbar scale is, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Am I there? Okay, good.
Yes.
First, the Dunbar scale is available online. It rates dog bites or dog incidents from 1 to 6, and 1 is just intimidation behavior and 6 is a human fatality. It lets us quantify and compare dog bites and the behaviors that go with them. So I would strongly recommend anybody out there interested in dog bite case, this is an example of it, to look this up. Like I said, level 1 is a dog that growls and lunges but doesn't connect. By level 3, we have minor bites. Level 4 is a single bite with serious damage. Level 5 is the typical chainsaw with legs. These give us a way to get beyond, ooh, that's bad, or nah, it's not so bad. In civil cases, like criminal cases, these can make a huge difference because we can quantify what happened. Now, as far as the dog bite worksheet, that's an extensive document that I put together that asks a lot of questions that we haven't necessarily asked in the past. I want to know more than what does the dog look like or how big is it? But we need to look at the history of the dog, both with the victim and with other people and with other animals. We need to look at the history of the owners. I have, for instance, dealt with a dog that reflexively, if you held your left forearm up, closed and grabbed you by the forearm. Investigation showed that this was the trained behavior because someone had tried to make this a homemade protection dog and had done it poorly. And Claudine, I know you know the difference between a good one and a bad one. The dog bite worksheet gives us a list of questions and gathers information that we haven't previously gathered. And I'd like to see it or something similar done all over the country because our resources of information on dog bites are limited. The reports very often are not in great detail. And there's questions that I would like to ask on a wide level that we've never asked before, and I think can make a difference, not only in the lives of dogs, but in the lives of the owners, and helping us do things like keep our children from getting hurt and killed, and keep our dogs well under control and understand what parts of their behavior can lead to a crisis.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, let's switch gears and let's go back and forth. I want to take some questions from the audience, but I want to show the audience this real quick. This is, there we go. I'm holding it up. This is a prosecutor's checklist, and Jim has provided his investigative worksheet, but basically it's quite extensive. I mean, we're talking, I don't know if you can see that, it's about 4 pages long. One of the things the prosecutor has to formulate too is what damages has the victim incurred. And people think, okay, they just look at the physical damage and then they look at medical bills, and that's not it. There's emotional damage, especially when it comes to children. We see a lot of PTSD, very bad regression in some younger children, have that shock and fear and anxiety as a result of it. So you've also got hedonic damages, and I'll show you a picture of someone. This person right here was mauled in Newton County many years, about I think 2003 it was. And she loved just being in her backyard, playing her music and gardening. That was her sanctuary. She lived alone. She did it almost every day. She was a flight attendant, and so she had a lot of time at home. But after the attack, which occurred in her backyard because her neighbor's dog came through a hole, she would never go back there again. And this is what it looked like after the fact. So this is called hedonic damages, where the loss of enjoyment of life is part of the damages. Don't forget that they have lifelong damages. And one of the things you want to articulate to a jury is that this person will experience this problem for the rest of their lives. So, for example, this woman had to put a salve in her eye because her eye would not close anymore. So every night, and this salve was very expensive, she would have to put this in her eye every night. And oftentimes her eye, she would wake up just because her eye was so dry. She couldn't wear makeup the same way again. And this was again for the rest of her life. So those are very important. One of the things in the dangerous dog law too is that we expanded the definition of, this is a hedonic here. We expanded the definition of severe injury. So anything that requires more than one suture can be bumped up to a severe injury. If severe injury is utilized, that's an automatic vicious dog in the state of Georgia. And that is a very different requirement. For example, the difference between vicious and dangerous, you have to have at least a minimum $50,000 insurance to cover bodily injury from that dog. Not so much for a dangerous dog, but a vicious dog, yes. So the definition of serious injury is really a good place for animal control and police officers to focus on, because if they believe that a puncture wound with a tear that's going to need 2 stitches should be bumped up to severe injury, that is a vicious dog. The requirements are a lot steeper for that particular classification. And don't forget, dog bites can also cause infections. If somebody's suppressed, immunosuppressed, they can be sick from a dog bite. I know there was a woman who died of a cat bite just from her finger. And don't forget those people that were not sure if the dog was treated, had rabies vaccinations, and the owner failed to prove so. Those people may have to go through a rabies series of shots, which are not cheap. And if they don't have insurance, unfortunately, they're going to use the emergency room to get those shots for a long period of time. We had a case in Jackson, Georgia. A woman incurred $27,000 bill for all the rabies protocols that she had to go through. And then we also had people running away from dogs, never got bit, but harassed or aggressively chased by dogs and ended up in the street getting hit by cars. So you don't always have to have an actual bite in your case, okay? Let's take some questions from the audience right now, and let me get out of here and stop sharing here for a minute. I think that's what I need to do. Boom. Don't save. Okay. Here we go. So here we go.
Just on what you just mentioned, Claudine, I personally have worked a case where a man got bitten on the finger. Mm-hmm. He was immunosuppressed due to having lost his spleen years before. And the common bacteria in a dog's mouth that we all come in contact went systemic, and he wound up dying slowly over a 5-day period. So these can go sideways if we don't do our job the first time.
Right. Another thing I want to point out too is we know right now COVID-19 is not transferable from dogs to humans. We do know that some dogs have gotten COVID from their humans. Now, every virus can mutate, and so right now, this is what we know. But we do know there are definitely zoonotic diseases that can be transferred. In fact, to get rabies, you don't necessarily have to be bitten. Saliva just needs to enter an open part of your body. For example, if you have a cut on your hand, and a dead dog, you know, drips saliva or has saliva near that, it can actually enter the body. So I know in India, somebody actually still got venom from a dead snake. So the other thing too, I want to bring up is we had a question, and that is, what happens when the victim is bitten? The case, they're of course in shock, and they're dealing with the damages and the injuries, and they're having to go to the hospital perhaps. Animal control comes out, and they work the case up, and there's a court date. The victim has no clue at this juncture that down the road, should they want to sue the person or collect a claim for damages for their injuries, they don't realize that it's going to be extremely difficult to get information from that dog owner. So investigators should really, really take the time and ask the dog owner, do you have insurance? What is the insurance policy? Give me the number, give me the name and the policy, and give that information to the victim, because when it gets down to the prosecutor, the prosecutor can ask for restitution. They can call their victim, interview the victim, and get the information and say, I want to see all of your medical bills, and we're going to ask the judge to give you restitution through the criminal case. Okay, let's say it's $10,000, right? Well, the person may not know that they need a reconstructive surgery down the road. So right now it might be $10,000, but 3 months from now for revision surgery, it could be $20,000. Getting restitution should always happen in the criminal case, and it does not bar the victim from going down the road later and suing civilly down the road. Now, I have often seen this happen in a criminal case where the judge will say to the victim, I don't want to hear about your restitution. You can sue them civilly. That's a civil matter. But I'm here to tell you, as a former personal injury attorney from years ago, most of these folks don't have insurance. And the idea of them getting a claim down the road is very little. Not to mention that if the dog owner is not willing to give them insurance information at that juncture, that victim has to then sue them officially in discovery. They can ask for that information, and it costs money to sue. And most personal injury attorneys do not work for free, and they won't take a case unless they know there's insurance. So those are things to keep in mind. We do it for motor vehicle accidents. Insurance is put right there on the report. We should do the same for the victim. One thing I want to talk about is forensics, Jim. There was a case in North Carolina where a woman was exonerated finally after 25 years that she did not have any participation in her son's death. And it turned out that dogs had killed the little boy. Had they had done a forensic on that, how would that have changed?
Well, we've had that happen in cases I've been involved in, where, again, as I said earlier, assumptions were made, and yet the forensics told us something different. And again, in the Logan Bratz case, assumptions were made that the two dogs they'd captured were the dogs involved. They weren't, because by applying forensic principles and comparing the bites and other physical evidence with the two dogs, we knew from the day I got up there that we were looking for yet another dog, a different dog. And I've seen these cases. There have been a few cases I've actually appeared for the defense because the forensics didn't back up the claims. In some cases, the investigators have been great. In Georgia, a couple of years ago, we had a case in Donaldsonville down in Southwest Georgia. The investigator from GBI called me in. They had caught a dog in the neighborhood that they assumed was the right dog. The GBI officer and myself went around, and we actually tested a total of 4 dogs and compared the bite marks. I was able to rule them out based on the general jaw characteristics, but we also didn't quit there. We sent DNA off, and the DNA backed up my exclusion of those 4 dogs. So Bad news is we didn't get the dog that did it, but the good news is that the 3 owned dogs that were potential suspects and the dog that was a stray that was found were cleared of that incident completely, and the stray dog wound up being adopted. So there was some positive outcome.
Let's take a question from the audience. Here it is. If a dog is contained inside an invisible fence and an unrestrained dog comes onto the property and is killed, can the dog still be investigated as a dangerous dog even though it was on its own property? We currently have a case like this. The answer is no, and the reason is the law is clear. The responsible dog owner law says that if you're going to classify a dog as dangerous or vicious, the attacking dog must be off of its property. Obviously, it takes into the effect that dogs do protect their territory. So the attacking dog must be off its property, and if it kills another person's pet while off its property, it can then be deemed a dangerous dog. Now, I will say the original bill that we wrote had the word injures or kills a pet, another person's pet. But unfortunately, a lobbyist managed to pull out the word injures. And I'll argue that oftentimes an injured pet actually causes more suffering and more cost, more veterinary cost than a burial or a cremation for a dog who's died. So really, other states include the word injures or kills. So the answer to your question is no, they cannot charge the dog owner for that dog as a dangerous dog because your dog was staying on its property. One of the other things I wanted to bring up is witnesses that you never thought could be a witness, okay? We found in one case there was a petition that had circulated in a neighborhood, and 49 neighbors had written, put their signature to it, because this person whose dog almost killed a woman, the woman I showed you, the picture of the woman that left the garden, it turned out that there was constant harassment among neighbors from the same dog and the same owner. So luckily, I actually went to the neighborhood. I went to the place where the dog came through the hole. In fact, it wasn't fixed even after she returned the dog back to her. And I walked around and I just knocked on some doors and I started talking to neighbors. And I was blown away on the things I learned. That just 2 weeks prior to this one incident, a little boy had been chased down to his door and he barely got to his door in time from the same dog that mauled this woman. But we found this petition and we used that in the courtroom. Also, we found that tree trimmers and people that don't go on your property but are near your property, or babysitters or pet sitters, will give you a major amount of information about dogs. And definitely take your time and look at the veterinarian's records. I used to be a vet tech when I was 16 years old, 16, 17, and 18. And we would write down dog needed the muzzle because it was very aggressive while being examined. So one of the things we look for as prosecutors and as civil attorneys is prior knowledge. Did the owner know or should have known their dog was dangerous or had the propensity to be dangerous? And let me tell you, that matters very much so in a civil case, especially the way our state civil dog bite is really not very good for victims. But if you can prove prior knowledge, it's really important. Jim?
That's honestly how we get most of the criminal convictions, is that negligent homicide statute that says if you knew or should have known as a reasonable person that there were behaviors that you should have been alarmed about and didn't try to fix and didn't manage, then I get to put you in or help somebody put you in jail.
Great. Well, and another thing too is defenses to these cases. Obviously, we have defenses built in. One of those is if you are an imminent threat of a dog attack, you have the right to defend yourself, whether it be with a gun or whatever you have handy. Now, you can't walk into your house, close the door, lock it up, load your gun, and come back out. The imminent part disappears. Now, if that dog is still posing a problem to your property or a person in danger, you can still go out and defend it, or defend yourself or the person that is with you. We have we're wrapping it up now, but we will be doing a conference just on the responsible dog owner law for Georgia. We'll set out a date for you guys. We're going to go through it tooth and nail. We're going to go over why this was put in and why that was not put in. We're also going to talk about a sample ordinance for your local jurisdiction. And I will say this, the responsible dog owner law is a minimum standard for anyone to follow within the state of Georgia. If you do not have a dangerous dog ordinance in your county, then you use the state law. If you have one in your county, you can still use the state law anytime. The state law is beneficial because it creates a criminal record. It is a state violation which has more penalties and longer probation. And I recommend it highly when you have a serious injury or at least a Dunbar level bite of 4 and beyond. And repeat offenders, you should definitely use the state law. There are a lot of questions about the state law. We want to help you answer those. So stay tuned for the next webinar. I want to thank everybody for their time. Jim, especially to you very much. We hope to see all of you at the expo in September. So stay tuned and appreciate your time. You guys have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks.